Hatred is too strong an emotion to waste. I like that sentence. Now, there are over 100,000 one-star reviews for Pride and Prejudice. We read them all, so you don't have to.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let Them Eat Books. This is our second episode, and today we're going to be talking about Pride and Prejudice. We talked about Dostoevsky last time and how great he is, and then our British fans said not so fast and suggested one of their greats, Jane Austen. So we're going to read one of the most famous books of all time. We're going to talk about it. We're going to start off with some Goodreads reviews that did not feel the same way about it that we did.
I love this book. What do you think about this book?
I really enjoyed this book. We'll rate it at the end, but I highly rate this book.
Big fan. This is my second time reading it, maybe third if I read it in high school, I don't remember. I want to read some opinions, and we're going to talk about them. Let's start with Greg. These are Goodreads reviews of Pride and Prejudice. Now, there are over 100,000 one-star reviews for Pride and Prejudice. We read them all, so you don't have to. And we polled some of our favorites, some of our favorite one-star reviews. Now, even though there are over 100,000 one-star reviews, the book is still, I think, a 4.36, somewhere around there. It's mid to high fours, because there are...
quite rare on Goodreads.
Quite rare
very
on
highly
Goodreads.
rated.
Goodreads is just... there are brutal people on there. You should follow us on Goodreads. I don't provide reviews. I just don't think I have enough to say. Do you?
I provide electric reviews. So yeah, definitely feel free to add us on Goodreads. We will try to add a link in the comments if we can figure it out.
All right, let's start with Greg. Greg wrote, "This book has been billed as one of the greatest love stories in all of literature. I have no idea why. When the story begins, Elizabeth Bennet is smart, independent, and not overly concerned with bagging a husband, which, by the standards of Victorian England, makes her a feminist trailblazer. Then she meets Mr. Darcy, who acts like an insufferable prick, this in a society obsessed with grace and good manners, and Elizabeth has the good sense to identify Mr. Darcy as the insufferable prick he is, and so she spends the first part of the book rightly loathing this asshole. Fast forward. By chance, Elizabeth finds herself touring Darcy's palatial estate, meeting his hundreds of servants, using his solid gold bidet. That was only in the movie. And suddenly she starts thinking that maybe Mr. Darcy isn't such an asshole after all. The moral of the story seems to be that enough money can make even the most abrasive and obnoxious jerk seem like Prince Charming. And what's really frustrating is when you realize that it's 200 years later, and while the world has changed immensely, the people are still the same. Go Society. So if you want to read a real love story, read Anna Karenina. If you want to read the biggest piece of anti-feminist drivel in the literary canon, then by all means read Pride and Prejudice. Greg must have been having a bad day. He says, and I quote, "While the world has changed immensely, the people are still the same." Greg knows some Darcys. Perhaps he knows some Elizabeth Bennets too. He starts out by saying it's one of the greatest love stories in all of literature, or it's so called. I mean, there's a lot of literature out there.
There's a lot of literature. I think it's very interesting. I appreciate a strong opinion. Such as the one Greg has. It sounds like Greg might have only watched the movie and did not read the book, or at least read too much into the book. It's very strange because our ideas of love are different nowadays than they were back then. And I don't know if I was feeling overly excited about the love aspect of it, but I just really appreciated the book as a whole. You know, the dialogue is very witty. It has a nice balance of detail and plot. It moves at a very enjoyable pace. So I don't consider it one of the greatest love stories of all time, but maybe you feel differently.
You know, you're talking about the Twilights, the Notebooks, all the other Nicholas Sparks books, Titanic, Blood Diamond. There's just so many fantastic love stories in literature and cinema. And we are talking about the book here, but perhaps Greg did watch the movie and jumped on Goodreads to leave his review. I don't remember a solid gold bidet, and I don't remember hundreds of servants, Greg. I gotta be honest. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great love story. I appreciate a good love story. Greatest in all literature, it probably is billed as that. And I do have an idea why, Greg. You said I have no idea why. It's a great book. It has all the romantic tension that you want. It leaves you wanting more. I think after every chapter, you're kind of looking for who's going to make the next move between these two and between Bingley and Jane. And eventually, Lydia and Wickham get involved. I think it is a romantic book. Perhaps one of the greatest. Who's to say? Caroline says, flowery, pretentious writing does not a good story make.
First line feels a little pretentious. But
the irony. Flowery, pretentious writing does not a good story make. Austen created stiff, one-dimensional characters, brought them to life as much as she could in a boring plot, and had two of them fall in love somehow. No one writes romance colder than Austen did. As for the assertion that this is satire, I wholeheartedly disagree. The mark of satire is that it's very obviously facetious. As for the assertion that this is satire, I got so nervous. As for the assertion that this is satire, I wholeheartedly disagree. The mark of satire is that it's very obviously I can't say this word. Facetious. Such as the supreme, a modest proposal. Pride and Prejudice doesn't obviously lampoon anyone or anything. Either Austen intended to write satire and failed, or she didn't, and discriminating readers claim it is to make themselves feel better about having enjoyed a straight-up romance. Readers wanting a classic with a plot that's actually interesting should grab Jane Eyre instead. Charlotte Bronte is far and away a better writer and storyteller, and her storytelling intent is clear. I haven't read Jane Eyre, but I would like to.
I haven't either.
What if we read Jane Eyre and then we can't stand Pride and Prejudice after?
Then we will update our eaters.
We certainly know that Jane Eyre will not have any flowery, pretentious writing.
Yes, I do wonder how much of that is just like it was a different time. We have much different language nowadays. Oftentimes, our culture is much more casual. So, I mean, it's obvious that at certain points in the book, it seems a little bit stuffy and unnecessary. Some of the words they're saying to each other, but I think that kind of plays into the satire. She shows the extremes of that with certain characters, such as Mr. Collins, who is just a goofball, like a very unself-aware goofball who, comically mentions his landlady just every other sentence. Yeah, just very unnecessary dialogue from him. So I think that might just be kind of her point, is she's making fun of that.
I think there definitely is satire, and I think that's evident in the way that other characters respond to people like Mr. Collins. That's how anyone rightly would respond to a character like him, or like Lady Catherine, the way that people who can kind of see through her character, how they respond to her. I think there is definitely satire in there. Stiff one-dimensional characters. Now, this is something I thought about because the characters in Pride and Prejudice, they really stick to themselves throughout the whole book. And I would say perhaps except Darcy and Elizabeth, everyone is very predictable. Do you agree? Did you find the characters pretty predictable?
For the most part, they do seem predictable. But also, do you need one-dimensional characters to make the three-dimensional characters shine, To be able to notice that they are who they are.
Who do you think are the three-dimensional characters in this story?
I mean, Elizabeth, Mr. Darcy, Elizabeth's sister Jane. She is pretty predictable.
Do you think Wickham is three-dimensional?
Maybe, because he kind of has those two sides.
Two-dimensional?
Yeah, Wickham is two-dimensional.
Brought them to life as much as she could in a boring plot, and had two of them fall in love somehow. I thought it was pretty obvious how they fell in love. I read the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also, boring plot, I don't know. I agree with what you said earlier, where it's just, at the end of every chapter, I just wanted to keep reading.
Yeah, I really did want to keep reading.
Excited to continue picking up this book, especially because I was reading another unpleasant book at the time. It was Ulysses, an all-time bad book.
Lady Nerd writes on Goodreads, Hatred is too strong an emotion to waste on this literary twilight. Now, Twilight, for what it's worth, captivated the United States of America, possibly the world, a generation, really. There are so many great things to say about Twilight that we're not going to get into it here. Maybe that's for a later episode. But to call it a literary Twilight, what do you think about that? Did you read or watch Twilight?
I never read it. I did watch it at one point.
I can't remember if I read it, but I've watched it.
It was quite humorous. This is one of our normal points of contention, though, in our friendship is Twilight.
Yeah.
I'm not that big of a fan.
Well, you
so
liked
I think
the
that
first one.
Generation. I did not. I think that generational gap is showing between us.
Yeah.
And also, is she talking about Twilight, the book, the movie? Is she talking about
Right.
Twilight as, the sun has
The current
set,
time of
you
day.
know? Yeah.
It's hard to imagine that she's talking about the books or movies Twilight, because to paint that in some kind of negative light, I find that to be a little unbelievable, challenging to wrap my head around.
So, Lady Nerd, if you are out there watching this, call into the show.
Call in.
Yeah. Drop a comment.
I'll put Ethan's number down in the description. Call in. And we want to talk about this. Hatred is too strong an emotion to waste. I like that sentence. I think it's a great sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, shout out to you for the sentence. I don't think you had to choose Twilight. I don't know. I don't think Twilight was the right choice. Alright, let's move on to Nikki. Austen and I do not get along. Overall, this is a feminist nightmare where all of the female characters are driven by and obsessed with marriage and catching a man. The characters are pretentious and dull, much like the plot. I'll have to take others' word for it, thank you, regarding this being a romance. There really isn't proof in the novel. That's just ridiculous. I think Nikki should have watched the movie, maybe for some clarity. I also cannot fathom the idea that this is referred to as comical by literary circles. Perhaps that is more to do with the situations in the very specific early 1800s setting. But I don't care what the historical setting is. There simply is not a good story to be had here. Overall, I cannot help but feel sorry for Austen if her real life inspiration led to this. That last sentence is Mark Twain-esque, which we'll get to.
We will get to that.
Yeah. Feminist nightmare. I don't know. I can't really.
This is something we should talk about, though, because I think that from where we are at today, it's difficult to tell if this is like, a scathing commentary on life at the time, or if it's more of just like a lighthearted, humorous look. We're not sure. We've never had to live in this life where, our parents' wealth dictates whether or not we're able to marry someone or not. Mm-hmm. The feminist nightmare part of them all sitting around waiting for a husband, I think the movie does, kind of showed me just how boring their lives might have been.
Right.
They are, especially if you're in this class of people that has enough money because you own land, like her father did. It doesn't seem like they have much to do. They don't have jobs to work. And even her father, it seems like he kind of just sits around and reads books all the time, which is a great way to live life. But
it's a fantastic way to go.
But yeah, if you think about it, back then, not much entertainment-wise. Really not a whole lot of activities to participate in, it seems like. So,
what would you have them been doing, Nikki?
Yeah, that's a good
question. Playing cornhole? Going to university? Going to the local swimming pool? How about taking an overseas trip with friends? I'm not thinking about guys. They had nothing to do. Although Mary found books. She was less interested in guys.
True, there were, and we're not saying that. The only thing that there is for women back then to do was to get married. But
he's not saying that.
I think the fact, this is what the book is based on. It'd be like if someone was angry about white knights, which we talked about last time, and saying, oh, people act like the only thing to do in Russia is fall in love. That's what the book's about. So that's why it's emphasized so much, That's
a romantic idea. Did you come up with that?
I did not. I don't know. I don't know.
I like your idea that maybe this is just a lighthearted maybe not even a commentary, just a lighthearted story about the way things were back then. It doesn't have to be read with such like a serious angle. It just seems more fun for two guys reading it
in 2025.
In 2025, I agree with your point that I think it's a little more. Well, I don't know if I agree, but I think it's worth considering that it could be more of a lighthearted approach, and maybe you would enjoy books more if you weren't judging them on whether or not they are a feminist nightmare. But I'm getting Lady Nerd and Nikki. We have hatred is too strong an emotion. Feminist nightmare. This is very strong language. I just thought the book was a little more fun than that. A little more lighthearted. John writes, "Holy crap. The amount of relief I feel after finally finishing this ridiculous novel is unequaled. It is filled with talking, and I rarely ever knew who was being discussed or why they were being talked about. I'm still not sure how many Bennett daughters there are." John.
Oh, John.
John, we want you to put down the classics for a little while. Read something a little more modern. I'm going to send you, I have a first edition of The Notebook. I'm going to send it to you. Everything's clear there. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. Classics sometimes are hard to read, and you have to reread them, and it is sometimes tough to catch funny things and irony and who they're talking about and what's going on. But that's what makes them so great, is we're not just like reading these boring stories about these worlds that we inhabit now. And there's value to modern stories as well, but one of the great things about classics that you're glimpsing into the way people were and how they talked and the social norms of the time.
I also, there were a couple times in the book where, they say Miss Bennett, and there are 5 Bennett daughters and 1 Bennett mother. So Mrs. Bennett, that's 6 different people that could be addressed in that moment. But, I mean, if you put your mind to it for about 9 seconds, you can get to the bottom of it.
9 seconds, John. You were 9 seconds away from a 3-star review, but you stuck with 1. The amount of relief I feel after finally finishing this ridiculous novel is unequal. I felt relief after I finished reading it because then I remembered I'm going to watch the movie again. And I was pretty excited for that. You watched the movie as well after finishing the
I did.
the book?
I did. It was a nice little treat at the end.
Did you like the movie?
I enjoyed the movie.
I enjoyed the movie too. I think the movie is as divisive as the book. People either love it or hate it. I think the movie was a little too short. I think it moves along too quickly. It skips some of the kind of nice details that float through a classic book that stretch it out a little bit, John. Make it a little harder to follow. But those details are where some of the magic happens. The book or the movie rather, kind of scooted along at a faster pace. So overall, you like Pride and Prejudice?
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
What do you rate it? Out of 5?
Out
Out of 5 Bennett sisters.
Out of 5 Bennett sisters, I rate it 4. 4 out of 5 Bennett sisters.
4 out of 5 Bennett sisters. What's it missing?
So, I enjoy books that make me think deeply or make me rethink certain things. And this just didn't have that. This didn't have those quotes that stop you and you wonder where that's been all your life, or that opens up a new thought for you. It was just a really enjoyable book, and so I think 4 out of 5 Bennett sisters is very appropriate for the rating. Well, I assume you would rate it 5 out of 5.
I rate everything 5. I don't have. You're gonna have a hard time getting a 4-star review out of me. It's gonna be really bad. Do you think that's a fair assessment to judge everything based on needing to blow your mind? Look, I'm not here to look. I don't want to get.
No, that's a good question because I mean,
you enjoyed it, isn't that?
I
enough?
did enjoy it. Yeah, and maybe that's enough for books. But I don't know. I take my Goodreads ratings pretty seriously. If I'm going to rate it a 5 out of 5,
it's got to be.
It has to really make me think and really stops me. And I think fun stories can do that too. Don Quixote. I think that's one of the greatest books ever written, and that's
5 out of 5.
5 out of 5.
Okay.
I think that is a very, goofy, funny, satirical novel. So I think it's possible for those type of books to get up there.
Okay. Who was your favorite character in Pride and Prejudice? And yes, I rated 5 out of 5 Bennett sisters. It's a great book. Nothing to change. Although I could use in the back of the book a QR code that takes me to the trailer for the movie, because when you finish the book, you want to watch the trailer for the movie. So who is one of your favorite characters? Who is your favorite character in the book?
So it's hard not to be influenced by the movie. I mean, I really like the actor that plays Mr. Darcy, but I think that someone that always made me laugh was Mr. Collins. He is a ridiculous character. You know, his long, drawn-out thank yous, or even just like him talking about his landlady, Lady Catherine, at just comical lengths, and just kind of strange times to bring her up. I thought that he was very funny to be a part of it. And Elizabeth is excellent too. I mean, just her character and her strength of will is very admirable. Who's your favorite character?
Her wit and her charm.
Yeah.
Maybe Elizabeth. I'd say Elizabeth. I also like Mr. Bennet. I think he's funny. What do you think about Mr. Bennet? You feel sorry for him?
Not really. I think that Elizabeth kind of touches on it at one point about him not putting enough into their relationship or not being serious enough about their relationship. And
him and his wife, or him and his daughters?
Him and his wife.
Right.
He has a pretty, it seems like at least a very good relationship with Elizabeth, and you know, Jane is kind of difficult not to get along with. So yeah, I don't feel bad for him. I think that he has what he needs to live a happy life.
I think he's one of the kind of ridiculous characters. I think that his just apathy for his wife and all of her problems, but she's a handful. She's awful. Yeah. But I think those characters that are kind of ridiculous, I think there's a lot of them. And I think they move the story along nicely. I think they accent the more sane characters. I think Darcy and Elizabeth are pretty sane. You mentioned that you feel like they were two of the most honest people in the book. They were always honest. They were consistently honest, where everyone else just seems to be kind of playing into moving that story and moving Elizabeth and Darcy along. Mm-hmm. So who's the book really about? Is it about all the people they're surrounded by? Is it about them? Is it about Elizabeth?
I think it's about us.
It's about us?
I think it's about the reader. No. I think that the book really is just about relationships in general. So, because I don't think you can, for the most part, I don't think you can analyze these characters without their relation to another, like without them in reference to someone else. So it's difficult to analyze Mr. Darcy without, you know, how he interacts with Mr. Bingley and obviously Elizabeth. I think you can tell a lot about, you know, Jane and Elizabeth by their relationship, as we just talked about. Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, it's hard to talk about one without talking about the other. Mm-hmm. So I think that it is just about relationships in general, and these relationships.
Do you think there's any healthy relationships in the book?
I think there are healthy relationships.
Because I think it's plagued by unhealthy relationships, the book. Not in a bad way plagued, but like Lydia and Wickham, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet, Jane and Mr. Bingley is even, I don't want to say it's unhealthy, but they never, you know, come forward to each other, which may have been just the norm at the time, but they never get on level terms with each other about what their expectations are.
I think Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth is a healthy relationship because of their honesty. They're very straightforward with each other, even if it's not, you know, socially acceptable. And I also think that Jane and Elizabeth have a very healthy, supportive relationship of each other. It's very clear they love each other very much. So I think that those two count. And I don't know, it seems like Mr. Collins and, what is her name? Is it Charlotte that he ends up with?
Lucas.
While it might not be the most romantic pairing, it seems like they're both satisfied enough.
Yeah,
so,
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that there are some healthy relationships.
Do you think people have changed very much in 200 years, or do you kind of see patterns in people that you know today? Do you kind of see them in any of the characters in the book?
I don't think they've changed too much. It's expressed differently, it seems like, nowadays. Like, people maybe settling in relationships for worldly reasons, such as, you know, money, security, whether or not there is that spark of love that is actually there. Even in White Knights, we saw a couple of, you know, kind of relationships play out like that, where they were willing to settle for each other or pursue each other for this reason or that. So I think that that's true. Obviously, there's still passion and there's still love, And I appreciate that Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth were not just like they changed throughout the book, but it wasn't just for each other. You know, it wasn't Mr. Darcy saying, I need to be a better person so I can, you know, become Elizabeth's partner. It was more just, oh, this girl has pointed out several things that are maybe wrong or not ideal about my character, and I just want to try to better myself. So I appreciate that, you know, it's not just, they're not just doing it for each other.
Right.
How do you feel? Do you think people have changed?
No, I think you see a lot of patterns and characteristics and just the way people talk to each other and about each other that felt very familiar. I think the book feels familiar. I think a lot of the relationships feel familiar. Yeah, I don't think so. I think society has changed and the speed of things has changed, relationships especially, but also, you know, people were getting engaged very quickly in Pride and Prejudice, and that doesn't happen now. But the speed in terms of how quickly you become acquainted with somebody and your own ability to put that into action rather than your status or your family. So I think the boundaries have changed and the speed of society has changed, but I don't think people really have. Do you think you would have been invited to the Netherfield ball?
That is an excellent question. Which ball is that? There were two balls in that?
Yep. There's the one at Meryton, and then they have one at Netherfield where Bingley lives.
Okay,
right
so that's the second
leave.
one.
Yeah, right before they leave.
I would have been invited.
I think so.
I feel pretty confident in that.
Okay.
So, would you?
I'm not sure. I think so. Would you have danced at these balls? Having seen the movie, because you don't really imagine. I didn't imagine the dancing how they played out in the movie. That's not what I imagined they were doing. I don't think I'm doing that.
George thought they were going to be grittying,
doing
Fortnite dances.
I don't know, line dancing, grittying. I don't even know what grittying is. For the record.
You should check out some of George's TikToks.
I do not.
But I kind of appreciate the dancing, that it's like, this is what you're going to do. You know, it's not like, oh, let's see if he can freestyle and somehow dance well. You know?
I hate dancing. Maybe I would have liked this, actually.
Yeah. So, and I enjoy also that they do dance with just like friends of the opposite sex as well. It doesn't always have to be some like big romantic gesture to say, hey, do you want to dance with me? It can just be like, hey, you're a friend of mine. You want to go do this line dance together?
I like that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I appreciate that part of it.
All right. So even if you were invited, you'd sneak in. You'd go to the Netherfield ball.
I'd be a part of it. Yeah.
You'd be a part of it. Yeah. Would you have enjoyed living in this time?
No.
No?
No.
I feel like you would have. Surrounded by books, simple job.
True. I think there are some aspects that would be enjoyable, such as, no social media, and less time on, more face-to-face time. And the face-to-face interactions mean so much more because, as we talked about, it was a little bit more boring. Yeah. You couldn't just get your entertainment from a screen. So, yeah, I think that aspect is very attractive, but just the way that, money and relationships are settled, and
it's not good.
Yeah, I feel like it was probably like an 80-90% chance you end up with someone just for practicality purposes. Right. So I would not want to be a part of that.
When you were reading this book and maybe watching the movie, did your like and dislike of Darcy kind of follow Elizabeth's, or like did you dislike him in the beginning? Did you like him at the end? Did you follow the same?
I think when I was reading the book, I did dislike him initially. In the movie, though, it's hard. I don't know. In the movie, he didn't seem that bad, like, in my opinion. He kind of just seemed like he was shy and was keeping to himself. And
I think they did that. I think they softened how his character a little bit for the movie. But, now I can't remember if he seems more intolerable in the movie or in the book.
But to answer your question, I think I was maybe a little bit quicker to be like, that Mr. Darcy, he's a keeper,
Yeah, okay.
Compared to Elizabeth. But
do you think his money is the reason they ended up together, Darcy's?
No, because, he proposes earlier in the book, when basically all she knows about him is that he has money, and she says no. And then once she starts to see his character kind of shine through in a few of his actions, he definitely seems to be more of like a take action kind of guy instead of talk about who he is. Mm-hmm. So I think once she saw that shine through and just how great of a lad he was, I think that's why they ended up together.
I thought it was funny when she joked that how much it impacted her affection toward him. When she saw Pemberley, she jokes to Jane that that's when she fell in love with him. I think that's pretty hilarious. But no, I don't think their money played a big part. I think you're right. Do you have any favorite quotes from the book? I didn't. Nothing really struck me. The first line is obviously pretty famous.
I really I think Mr. Collins is very humorous in her description of him, where he was showing Elizabeth a garden and talking to her extensively about it. And Jane Austen wrote, "Every view was pointed out with minuteness, which left beauty entirely behind."
That's great.
So yeah, just funny to work that in there. And then the opening line, if you want to read it, or I can.
Yeah.
It's
pull it up here. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. I don't think that's true. Maybe back then it was, but I don't think every single man in possession of a good fortune is in want of a wife these days.
I think that this goes to show back then. As I mentioned, Mr. Bennet, if he didn't have his wife and his daughters, he would just be kind of sitting alone in a room all day, apparently. Maybe speaking to a servant every now and then. Mm-hmm. So I think it is very natural for them to think, hey, there's probably more to this life than just sitting here and being rich.
One quote that we did not talk about yet, or when we were talking about the Goodreads quotes, was Mark Twain's.
So in this edition of the book, you have a few quotes from authors that feel either very positively or very negatively about it. It's very interesting that they would add that in the book. But Mark Twain was a very outspoken critic of other writers. He has some very humorous quotes. And in this book, or at least it is written, and I think it's from another book of his, maybe, I'm not sure, but he just said, "Jane Austen's books, too, are absent from this library. Just that one omission alone would make a fairly good library out of a library that hadn't a book in it." So basically that means a library with no books is better than a library with Jane Austen books in it.
That is harsh.
Yeah.
Definitely resembled some of the sentiments in these 1-star Goodreads reviews. I'm sure Mark Twain would have given it 1 star as well.
And that reminds us of another iconic review, kind of just to finish off for this book. And it was as low as it can get on whatever platform it was on. And it said, just a bunch of people visiting each other's houses. So
that's pretty much what the book is. It really is just a bunch of people visiting other houses.
There were a lot of house visits. Lastly, what should we take away from this book?
First impressions, the original title of the book, are important in how you make them, but they shouldn't decide how you're going to view or interact with other people based on the impressions that you take from other people, meeting other people. So I think you should be aware of the impression you're leaving on people, but I don't think you should let other people's impressions on you decide too much about what the future holds for you. What are we taking away?
Maybe just not to take things too seriously. There's normally a way to laugh at most situations. So I think that, whether it's just taking a step back and saying, man, this thing at work, this thing that's happening in the news, it is pretty uniquely dumb to our times. And being able to laugh that off is important. It's important to be able to get through the day.
I'm going to send that right to Lady Nerd and Nikki. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Let Them Eat Books. Thanks for checking out these 1-star Goodreads reviews with us.
And add us on Goodreads if you want to see how we feel about books.
Yes, mine are basically all 5 stars. So I'm not very interesting with my critiques. Ethan, he doesn't give 5 stars unless he's below his mind. Until next time, thanks for watching.